Testing. And yes, Commission President Rachel L. Smith, we are ready to begin whenever you are.
All right, today is Tuesday, November 10th, 2020. I'm going to call the City Commission work session to order. Will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Mayor Dan Holliday is absent this evening, and Commission President Rachel L. Smith.
Here. All right, so the first item on our agenda is future agenda items. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. So at our next commission meeting in November, we'll have the Thimble Creek Overlay District. I included for the December one, the mitigation bank program, realizing that that's for urban renewal, but we still need to carve out time during our 3 meetings per month to get that in. So we were asked to bring that mitigation bank program back. In December, Senate Bill 1573 deals with annexation, draft calendar for the 2021 commission schedule, and then a joint work session with PRAC, the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, starting to talk about some of the work that the Parks staff has been doing on cost recovery as it relates to funding of that department and projects that are necessary. Looking out into January, review of city commission goal policies. So you have a policy document that is adopted. We are going to bring that back to have a chance to look at that again. We had a pre-application. You may remember probably about 6 months ago, we had a discussion about pre-apps and whether they should be changed from their current format. And options were providing more detailed written summary notes that received a signature from the applicant, that they were reviewed and checked versus recording them. We did not do the recording, so we were asked to come back and check in with that, and then a Beaver Creek Road funding discussion.
Here.
Yes, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I actually think the pre-app recording thing is going to be dispositioned fairly quickly on the basis of what's already been provided. The question on the Senate Bill 1573 follow-up, I know that we've directed legal to look into criteria changes. Will that be part of that discussion?
Yes, it will.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Conkle, so you're on the funding statement that you just made regarding Beaver Creek Road, that's separate from what we're talking about with Trimble Creek?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so, we're looking, as part of Beaver Creek concept plan area, that whole area, when you're looking at it, is a lot of that system development is charge eligible, but there are additional significant, improvements that are necessary to like Beaver Creek Road. So there are some funding discussions or direction that we're going to need to discuss with that project.
The joint work session with PRAC on December 8th. Probably too many people for this room. Do you have a plan for how we're going to enable that meeting?
I think we're hopefully either going to be up in the new facility, or we potentially may have to do something via Zoom. Just by the time you put together.
Yeah, it's a big group.
A lot of folks to be able to try to get into one place.
More than we can arrange in here, so.
Yes.
Commissioner Smith, any comments or?
No, I guess I would ask, in addition to that, are we planning on having our next city commission meeting over Zoom too? Based on the new guidelines, or have we talked about that? Are we gonna do it?
No, when we looked at the new guidelines that the governor has put out related to the 2-week pause that starts tomorrow for Clackamas County, we feel that the measures that we have in place right now are meeting or exceeding those. Really it was looking at 50 or less in restaurants that included customers and staff. It addressed assisted living facilities. It was 50 people or less in like pools, bowling alleys. It was a recommendation to try to encourage as much work at home. And then for social gatherings on a personal level, trying to limit those to 6. And I think as well as in restaurants, it was 50 or less plus staff and limiting party size to 6. Mm-hmm. So, the measures that we've put in place right now, I after our discussion with the executive team and looking at the policy that we put into place, we think that we're meeting it. We haven't rolled back to baseline. We're still in level 1.
And we're all socially distanced in here.
Yeah, if the commission would like to go Zoom, that's certainly a discussion that the commission could have. I have no problem with that. We're running all the other committees that way at this point. But we're also, I think, trying to implement the requirements as best we can. And I think we're meeting them.
Do we know then, if we did our in-person meeting, would that be at the new facility this next week or no?
We are
Hopefully.
going like gangbusters, trying,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, but we don't know for sure.
Right, Katie?
I don't know, Katie, are
I'm
you
posting
feeling
the
comfortable?
agenda today or tonight, this evening, while we're at this meeting, and I'm posting it that we will be at that facility.
Hopefully.
We are gonna we already have
Yeah.
done some testing. We're doing some testing again on Friday. We're doing some testing again on Monday. Everything is not completely working. We're having problems with one of our cameras. We're having problems with the audio and the video working at the same time. Comcast has not been able to get in and do their part either, and so we're waiting on that, which that aside, we could still have our meeting there and not broadcast live on cable TV if we do not get the Comcast piece of it installed and working correctly. But we still got a bunch of missing parts and pieces that are constantly moving. And technology is always really finicky, so it's super hard to make sure that every single piece is working the way we want it to work before we get in there.
I hope you don't feel like we're rushing you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm perfectly fine. If it's easier just to say, we're gonna meet here, let's meet here.
I'm with that as well.
I mean, our next meeting has the second reading of the ordinance for Waterboard Park.
Correct.
And I don't know what else is on the agenda, but I know that one is of interest, and we had folks that were planning to give public comment. I mean, I want to do what's best for giving the public comment and the public transparency piece of it. So I'm totally fine just meeting here, so I hope you don't feel like we're pushing you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Say,
either way.
start of the new year, let's move over there. Stay here till the end of the year, since we already know this works 99.9% of the time, just that one time, and get that system up to where you're satisfied with it.
Okay, we'll talk about it tonight and see where we're at. Because I think I think we can still broadcast live over our YouTube channel. We would be able to record everything. It's the Comcast streaming onto Willamette Falls TV that's the issue. So it would be broadcast as a recording.
My last question is, I think our last work session, I believe it was our last one, we asked you to focus on items that could affect the budget. Do you feel like with the current schedule we have that we're kind of tackling most of those?
Yeah, I feel like the marijuana tonight,
Right.
the policy for nonprofits.
Parks
I am
discussion.
completely drawing a blank, but we brought something last time or the time before that was identified as one of the potential budget items. But yeah, I think, I think it was probably 3 meetings ago where there were some items that were identified as priorities to try to get done before we roll into budget season. And, I think that these are the 2 last outstanding ones related to that.
All right, so if there's nothing else, I don't think there's anything else that I'm seeing from the commissioner, so we'll move on to discussion items. Number 2 is marijuana business tax revenue update.
So I'll go ahead and start this one evening, Commission President Lyle Smith and Commissioners. This is an update related to the marijuana business tax revenue. I included in the packet, probably the last time we had a significant discussion was back in June 12th of 2018. Finance Director Wyatt Parno, gave an update of what the marijuana tax was, how it worked. There's a state revenue component of it that the local jurisdictions get. And then there's also the 3% that the city put in place for businesses here that we collect as well. I think one of the main things associated with this is that the marijuana tax, when it comes in, goes into the general fund. It's not like a system development charge or the tourism hotel tax that we have, where it's a dedicated fund where it can only be spent on a certain type of expenditure. So when we started to collect the marijuana tax, I think one of the discussions around that was, what do we do with this additional revenue that comes in? And I think, in looking back at this, we ended up hiring the homeless liaison officer somewhat concurrently with that revenue source coming in. And we keep referencing it because when we hire a staff member with new funding that comes in, we don't want to forget that that was the revenue source for that position. It's a little bit different than we also made the decision that we wanted to start investing in and catching up on some of our parks deferred maintenance. So we dedicated an additional $180,000 a year or $360 per biennium, starting in our current year right now, that would go towards parks deferred maintenance projects. So essentially increasing the capital expenditure side in the Parks and Rec department. So that one is a little bit different because you could take that money back, the 180 a year or the 360 total, and it's not affecting a position. It's just going to affect how many projects that we can do. So there's, we've kind of utilized this funding that's come in two different ways. I think the other part is looking at I'm not sure what to think of the current quarter tax revenue that came in. I think it was 200 and, sorry, I think I wrote it in here. I think it was 270,000 or 220,000, which, that's at 880 for the year, which would be a significant increase over what we've seen. We have seen increases year over year as this, it's become more standardized. I think more businesses have started up. I think that it's not necessarily just marijuana sales anymore when you're looking at CBD sales as well. So all that goes into it. So we've continued to see this increase. I do wonder a little bit if COVID has driven higher sales. So I'm a little leery to be excited about the number because I think it's a little high relative to what we've seen, but maybe I'm wrong.
You're saying it might trail off.
I do.
Yeah.
I would want to be cautious that we don't
I agree.
put all our
Ducks in
eggs
that-
into that basket, that number is always going to be that number.
I agree, because there's an element of escapism going on right now, whether it be alcohol or some
We're
other.
seeing it across the board on all those types of taxes. I think the other thing is that with the passage of Measure 110, there is going to be an impact to the amount of the state share that comes to the local jurisdiction. Just don't know what that's going to be yet. I think we're going to have to kind of take a wait and see, and working with Mr. Brady Hoff in the finance department, $60,000 a year. but-
Estimated.
Yeah, just guesstimating at this point without fully understanding completely how that program is going to work, as well as when you don't know what the revenue coming in at the state level is going to be, it's hard to know what that pass-through is going to be as well. So I think we're, trying to be a little bit conservative, but I think the point is that we will see a little bit of a decrease in the revenues that we're bringing in.
So when did that ballot measure take effect? Did it take effect now or?
It was just passed, I think it goes into effect in February,
Is it
January or February.
February, okay.
Yep.
So it'll hit right about the time we're working on a budget?
If it went into effect in February, we probably would not see the payment until we're probably adopting the budget in June.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd be able to see any of it, but we might be able to put in some sort of conservative projection.
We've been pretty conservative just because my ability to guess how many ounces are going to be sold and what the tax revenue is going to be is really not very good, to be honest. So
Might as well
we've
just
historically been low.
roll the dice. I mean.
Yeah, we've historically been low and kind of rolled it into the next biennium and then adjust as necessary. I think that the ability to use the marijuana resources to help offset and supplement some of the projects in the Parks Department has been a benefit. Commissioner Lyle Smith had brought up a couple, just had asked some questions about what type of projects were we able to do because of that additional 360,000 during the biennium. And we never specifically took 180,000 and said, you're going to do these 4 projects or this 1 project. It went into the operational budget, but we did put together a project list that equated to what the revenue was. So some of the more significant projects, the Chapin Park restrooms, That was all general fund money. It was a replacement of the existing facility. There were no system development charges or grants associated with that. We were able to match some funding for Ladderette Park. So that's the ongoing project right now, where we still have some expenditures coming in. That project is still in process. The Park Place Playground, we were able to leverage the $47,500 Metro Enhancement Grant with additional funding. So, I think the point is that we would have subtracted out $180,000 worth of projects a year without that funding, or found it from somewhere else to supplement from the general fund to do those projects. The other thing I would remind the commission of is that, we are looking at bringing in through the COPS grant, the mental health specialist position to help supplement some of the work that's going on with the homeless liaison officer, as well as the training of not only our police officers, but our frontline staff that are engaging and working with our homeless community on a daily basis, places like the library, city hall, the pool, where you have those frequent interactions. And so we'll be bringing that on. And so, there is no requirement that because it's marijuana money, it has to go into drug prevention or drug education, or that. We've kind of made that link a little bit in terms of finding this additional revenue source that came in to supplement additional improvements or staffing associated with some of those impacts that we've seen. And I think before I kind of turn this over real quick, I just want to say one more thing. I feel like this ties to our next discussion item a little bit, because we have received this request prior to the current budget we're in and during the budget process. And I know some commissioners have received it since that our current budget's been adopted, of a nonprofit group asking for some of the marijuana money to be, allocated back, appropriated to them for, drug education / safety, essentially buying lock boxes for locking up drugs in homes, recreational marijuana. So I feel like these two are tied a little bit, but we felt it would, just give a little bit of background about marijuana and how we're expending it, and maybe that rolls into the next discussion about how do we determine if we're going to invest with nonprofits.
Couple things. If I look at the balance sheet, it looks like we may be carrying forward as much as 138,000. Is that a correct evaluation of that third report? It shows we have a positive balance remaining of 138 at this point in time.
Yes.
Okay. And second, do you know how much the COPS grant funds out of the $150,000 expense of another officer?
It's a 3-year tiered program.
Understood, but in the first, do you know, like year 1, 2, 3? I know fourth year is gone altogether according to this report.
Is Jim on? Jim might be able to tell us exactly what the 3-year steps were. I think it was 30, 60, but I'm guessing.
Yeah, the total amount is $125,000, and I can't remember exactly how the tiering works, but the majority, you get more the first year, second, less the second, and the least amount on the third. But I can't remember the exact percentages.
So it's 120,000 over 3 years, so,
Not a
40,
lot.
40, 40. But,
120 total?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that this is a good discussion, because I remember the community reaction at first was, well, this is this pool of unspent money, and it's not.
Right.
So, the fact that it goes into the general fund, I know that's an accounting practice. I hate it when funds are commingled, because they kind of disappear, and there's things that I'm sure each of us would like to do with this. And does it have to be allocated specifically to a program that we've been approached about? Maybe, maybe not. Does the city want to take a more active role? I think about our senior center, and everything I say has to be tempered with the current COVID situation, But I mean, we have a senior center. We don't have a youth center. I mean, I know how I kept my kids out of trouble. I kept them busy, Is there a way to do that with these funds? And that's just a discussion item that maybe we can have in the future. And then apparently there's more than one existing program for the moderation of these, of use of drugs. I think there's a county program, a state program. So at what point, do we want to throw money at it elsewhere and lose control of it, or do we want to do something ourselves? So those are just things I'd like to discuss.
And I think my only nuance I tried to explain earlier was trying to keep track of the fact that we invested some of this money in hiring an employee. Like,
Yeah.
we could sit here and say, okay, we're gonna take all of it and put it into something different. But I've then gotta backfill that employee with the same pot of money, the same general fund pot of money, or cut it.
Right.
Right? So there's no increase in service by saying, okay, we're not gonna fund the homeless liaison officer anymore, and we're gonna put it into this. I've still gotta somehow backfill that or cut that position.
Understood.
And that's different than the capital outlays into parks.
Commissioner Smith?
I have a lot on this topic, but I'll cut it short. I guess this is a conversation I would like to see us maybe talk about more in our goals session.
Definitely.
Because I don't believe that we made a commitment to use these funds for that police position forever. You know, I think part of my struggle here is if we're talking positions or parks, that should be in our budget. That should be in our regular budget. And, you know, if we can't get there now, that's fine, but at some point we need to get there. And I definitely know there's a connection between, you know, these taxes and the police department and parks. And essentially what we're doing is we're saying, well, we don't necessarily have youth programs, but parks are essentially that. And so that makes sense. But I think we can do better than that. And I think I was struggling with this because we put it kind of back onto OC Together's plate and the school district to come back to us and give us some sort of a plan. And they've to yet do that. And I think part of that is because of, you know, school's out and I mean, school's, you know, offline and or online and everything's kind of changed. But for someone who works, you know, within the school district, I think when we get back into regular school at some point in the future, I would really like to have a plan for one, you know, how our school resource officers, you know, how those continue, how a portion of this tourism or this marijuana tax money could go into a program. I think there needs to be a dialogue or a work session just really on that. I think, you know, how do we utilize the school resource officers and how do we partner with the school district to create some sort of a program? And I mentioned, you know, almost similar to what we did with attendance court in a way that, you know, there's been this struggle kind of with how the school district deals with, you know, rules and policies versus how the police department deals with it within a school. And clearly, you know, arresting every kid for, you know, a drug issue is maybe not the best solution. How can we find, you know, on a first offense or something at school that they are put into some sort of a program? And whether that's done city locally or a collaboration countywide with other school districts, I think that should be something we should really think about, because I think we could utilize our school resource officers in a partnership in a way with OC Together where we're essentially supporting OC Together, but we're doing it with our money from this local tax, but we can also kind of know that it's having an effect and contribute to that. And I would like to see us have a larger conversation about that. And maybe that doesn't happen until we get back into the regular system of school back in session and things like that. But I think I would like to see us work towards that direction rather than just, you know, say, oh, this is going into the Parks Fund. You know, I definitely see the connection to the homeless liaison, and I think that's a valid position to support with this money. But I also don't want to get in a position where we're relying on these tax funds that could go up or down in any given year for a basic funding source for our normal budget items. And that's why I think, you know, with parks is why I really kind of less likely to support that in the future. We have a problem with our parks funding and we need to fix it. That's not something that we should be relying on, you know, random marijuana taxes to try to fix. I think it's okay now that we're kind of in a situation where we don't have a program in place to utilize these funds. And, you know, parks and schools are kind of off in a different direction right now. We can kind of, you know, use this funds temporarily to fix some things and get caught up. But I think we can do more in the future. I'd like to have that conversation.
And just so I don't start a rumor out there, the first quarter of this fiscal year was 187,459, so that's about 748,000 roughly, if you took all four at that rate. So we started off at 254,000. The next was 18-19 was 336. 19-20 we saw 496, and like I said, I'm a little blown away
We're
by
on
the,
trend. We're
by
on a
the
trend
number.
in
Yeah,
that,
so it's
yeah.
like maybe we're at 6.
Maybe.
You know, I thought 500 was a lot, you know, when I saw that number.
So,
But getting back to your point, I think that, you know, hopefully as we start to see this trend, we'll get a better idea of what that revenue source
Right.
is, and then decide on, you know, what's kind of stable
something, yeah.
in that.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
right. I agree with you, Commissioner Smith, and I know we made the decision the last biennium. I think this would be a good goal-setting policy discussion at our goals retreat, because I know we didn't do it before, but I'm more inclined to say, you know, and I know we don't have to because it's general fund dollars, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't. And I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. I mean, youth programs and stuff like that, you know, it could be that, you know, there is a tangent there with our Parks Department where they're making sure basketball courts have equipment where kids can go after school and play. I mean, there is a parks component, and I definitely agree with you on the homeless liaison, and there's a component there. And I feel like, I don't think we're gonna get there tonight, but maybe, you know, it's on the agenda for us to talk about at our goals retreat of what do we want that targeted money to go to, and be thinking about that. And I know Chief Ban has had his hand up a couple of times and wanted to speak.
Hand up or hand out?
Ooh,
Easy,
Two
Have you
hands,
heard
so I
that?
do 'em both.
Chief Ban.
Thank you. So I just wanted to throw two things out there. One thing that I'm not sure you're aware of, but we do pay now out of the general fund. It's not a huge amount, but there's a partnership that we've had longstanding with, it was with a different agency and now it's with a new one, but they provide juvenile diversion. And so for people that we do, the whole idea of SROs is that we can get to kids before we have to go so far as actually taking them into custody and charging them with something. But when that does happen, the first option for any of the lower level, you know, anything that's not a person crime or something like that, there's a diversion program that we work out of the police department where a counselor comes in and usually sitting down with parents issues and helping provide some structure that might not be around the home. And that's been a fairly successful project that we've done for a long time. The other thing that I'd say that I think, you know, as I think about this and the importance of marijuana, we are all very concerned about Measure 110 passing. The ramifications of heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, all these drugs becoming a $100 fine. The option is a $100 fine for user amounts, or getting somebody into filling out an assessment to potentially go to treatment. That's a great idea if people are that, if there's treatment available and people are that willing to go in. What we're very concerned about is what this is going to be with our community, that it's essentially legalizing all hard drugs. And we don't know the ramifications. The biggest one that I think we're concerned about is this legalization of marijuana has reduced the perception of danger for kids. That's been in a lot of studies. And with these drugs being essentially legal, we're really worried about what that impact is going to be too. So there's something on the horizon that is an absolute unknown, that could be potentially much more harmful than marijuana.
Thanks, Chief. I will say I was very surprised that measure passed, and I am deeply concerned for the same reasons that you mentioned. I think heroin and cocaine and methamphetamines are, I mean, they're a totally different category than legalized marijuana. And I am concerned about that. And it makes me think, again, so to return to our policy discussion, just as an idea for us to talk about, it could be that our goal in the next biennium is to, carve out what we want that community program to be, partner with the school district, partner with some, I don't have all the answers on this is not my forte, but obviously bring in the police department, and let's talk about what is the community program that we want to see to support our youth and this concern of this nexus with drug use. And I really appreciate Commissioner Smith's experience from being in the schools and having that direct tie and seeing it directly as well. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yeah, I had many thoughts about this during my last campaign for reelection, and I kept thinking about, well, we have a senior center, but we really don't have a youth center. And I think about the small communities I've lived in where the bowling alley was the center of life for a lot of kids and things. And I'm thinking about, I hesitate to, if two police positions are 50-60% of the total income here, and I agree with Commissioner Rocky Smith about, let's not consider this a perpetual source of funding, because that's not how we do business. And I'd love to do something if that means utilizing a current facility like the senior center, and we put on Saturday night events for young people. The thing I have about diversion, I and maybe correctly or incorrectly, I equate that in my mind with after the event has occurred, and now we're trying to divert a kid away from a course of action he's already taken. And I try to let's keep them busy ahead of time, that's what sports and theater and all those things are about. So if there's something even if it means paying additional salaries, that we can open up an existing facility for the use. And again, I know all those thoughts are tempered by the current existence of COVID, but at some point I'd like to make that breakthrough.
I also think our evangelical community could play a role in that. I know for me growing up,
Sure.
my church activities was where, I went there to play,
CYO,
to see my
Catholic
friends
youth,
and to
yeah.
play. And we had a hall where we could have play games, and we had trick or treat, Halloween events, so I mean, that was the youth center in my tiny town, that
Pulling
facilitated
together.
that. Yeah.
Whether it be church or
Yeah.
government or private, I think we have the wherewithal to do this. We just have to realize, I agree with everything you said, Commissioner.
Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple things. One of the things I'm concerned with, and just looking at the little spreadsheet, is that the amount for cleanup seems exceptionally low to me. And I'd like to have a discussion further about increasing that.
Homeless camp cleanup.
Yeah, and basically just, if it's not a camp, it could be a camper. I've been getting in the last 3 weeks quite a few calls about places in Oregon City that have become a little bit of a dumping ground. Thank goodness, at least 3 of the calls involved ODOT property, so I referred them to ODOT maintenance, which
Good luck.
I've actually talked to them, and, they've got things on their schedule. So I think that's one thing that I'd like to have further discussion about, looking at that. The other thing is the same as what everybody else has said. I'm not having as much heartburn about helping to fund the position, as long as we know that in the long term, we're going to put those funds into a dedicated position. I'm not objecting at all to us funding the mental health specialist, and actually I'd like us to get more than one. I think the need out there is much greater than we know. Right. And would be nice to have 2 people working so that they have some backup for each other, including the homeless liaison's position as well. I know the police officers are sort of his backup, but it would be nice to have a backup to the backup, so to speak. So I just want to throw that out for consideration. And I don't disagree with, what you all said in terms of youth. I mean, we all look at it from a little bit different standpoint because of our perspectives. And I will agree with Frank, in this point, that yes, my parents made sure we were busy. We were in everything, which was a nightmare for carpooling, but it happens. We did have opportunities in our community. I mean, Obviously, we had activities at the pool, that they would have teen nights. There were all those manga nights and card nights and things they were doing at the library. I know they're doing a lot of that online, but it's not the same as having interaction with your peers. We've got to figure out some way to get some movies back into the system for, kids to see, whether they can stream them or not, but, so they can, but again, it all depends on where we are in terms of our phases with our COVID. It's very discouraging every time I go up to the hilltop and I see that empty parking lot for the movie theater. And I mean, I know why they can't get together, but they can't open right now, but it would definitely provide some diversion. But I can tell you that any given day of the week, when I'm up and down 7th Street, the parking along Madison is always full on the northwest corner of the street. It's very busy all the time over there. It's where the marijuana store is in my neighborhood. Lots of people in and out, in and out. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that conversation. And I think, moving into goal setting, when we talk about that, I think just hopefully we can keep, as part of this is we've got this $150,000 commitment to a homeless liaison officer. We're bringing on the mental health specialist, and we've made a decision in the current biennium to invest in parks, right? So there's kind of a baseline number there. And how we move that is fine, but just, it's not like it's new money.
No,
The pot is what the pot
parks
is.
thing. I'm supportive
when
of
we look at that, I
parks.
don't want to be Debbie Downer and wet blanket, but, and then Jim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about cleanup. I guess I would say that, I think we're,
It's a really disgusting job.
we find the money to deal with the cleanup issues that we have, like not having a specific line item with, if we go over it, we deal with that and we make the adjustments to make sure that we can continue to do that. It's not like, oh, we've hit our number and we got 6
We're
months
done.
left and we're done.
Yeah.
Right, that's not happening. But I do appreciate that because that is a bigger discussion because you're probably looking at more of, it's more of additional FTE than necessarily just having more money, right? I mean, there's only so many people to do the work right now. And Jim, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about cleanup component of this at all.
Is it also, I would think it's health and safety is really the primary concern. And some of the sites that I have seen and been aware of, there are, needles and
Yeah,
things.
lots,
And that's like,
It's not just picking up litter.
no, it's more than that.
Yeah.
We do some picking up, Code does some picking up. We recently, you'll see our homeless liaison now has a pickup that has a bed in the back for those sorts of things. But then we also have contracted with an outfit that has done some cleaning for us. And that is, it is fairly expensive, but it's something that's been pretty successful, the old broken window theory. You mentioned the ODOT properties, Commissioner McGriff, where there's 2 very large camps that are on ODOT property right now, and there's also, if you look under I-205,
Yes.
right on 99 there, that has been pretty, and a lot of it is just, some of it isn't even a current camp, it's a bunch of trash that's there. ODOT has currently suspended their contracts for cleanups, and so we've been working with them, and we're about finished. We've actually got an agreement where we're going to be able to trespass people from their property and also do cleanups. They're not doing them, so we either do them ourselves or we put up with the eyesore of what's going on there.
Why are they not doing
So
it?
you're going to see some movement in that.
Why are they not doing it?
Because of COVID and
Oh,
the
I see.
non-displacement of homeless camps right now
Okay.
is a state directive.
Is there any way that they can, I hesitate to use the word barricade, but I'll use the word barricade, that they can secure that area so that it doesn't become a habitual place that people are sliding under there?
It'd be a
I
conversation.
think, yeah.
It's a question for
It's like
ODOT.
moving a glacier, I think.
Yeah.
Well, they've done it elsewhere. I mean, I've seen where they have secured,
Rocks.
not rocks, but they've secured.
They've fenced it off some areas.
Overpass where part of the roadway goes over 9090 in Milwaukee. You go to further down McLaughlin, and as you head towards the Central East Side, they've got some corners that they have literally barricaded that that off, and they've made it secure so you can't even use bolt cutters and stuff to get in there. But at least, Jim, it would be worth having the conversation with them about securing some of those areas.
I think, Tony, what Tony mentioned, I think until COVID's over, I don't think that they are going to do anything. Basically, they're taking direction, the same direction all state agencies are taking, which is a complete hands-off approach to everybody in the homeless community.
May I comment on my own suggestion? Something I'd like to say, when I advocate for like keeping youth busy and providing programs and things, that's going to be a difficult thing to measure because you're as opposed to a diversion or something where a child gets in trouble and then we have a statistic where we've diverted. You really can't track an event that doesn't happen. That if we kept somebody busy and they were such that they didn't have those difficulties, I don't think we'll be able to measure it, but it's just a thought for the future.
I think the metric would be whether or not we just had participation. We know there's value
Yes, we
in
do.
it, and therefore, if it has participation, we know that we're providing value to our youth. And that would be my metric.
agree
If
with that.
we were offering something and nobody was showing
showing
up and it just wasn't reaching anybody, then that would be something different, but.
And I realize
Just
it
my
may,
comment.
and it's a very good comment. I realize it may involve additional expenditure of salaries, people to monitor it, to run it, to be present during those times when it's open. Thank you.
I also wanted to mention that the downtown clean and safe staff person also picks up things downtown as well, including needles, and they have sharps containers and other things. So, and they're also using, hoses to clean doorways.
All right, any final comments? I think we're ready to move on to the next
So it
item.
sounds like this will just, this will be a topic for the retreat.
Yes.
So we'll make a note of that, but at this point, not asking for any additional follow-up on this item.
No, I think we've been successful in some of our goals this biennium, and so we'll hopefully be able to remove some from that list and then come up with some new ones to put on for the next biennium. So in that sense, I'm excited about that. I think I'd love to check things off lists, that's great. Makes me warm inside. All right, let's move on to discussion item number 3. This is policies for funding nonprofit organizations.
Thank you. So the commission had requested a work session to discuss if there's a need for policies to guide decisions on whether or not to fund nonprofit organizations. So I got to be honest with you, I struggled with this one a little bit. I did not find, or when working with Lisa and the other staff, other jurisdictions that necessarily had here are the policies for this that weren't kind of like a grant. They have a grant program like the Metro Enhancement Grant. We found a lot of policies from philanthropic organizations. Here's our vision, here's our mission, here's what we'd like to accomplish, those type of things. And so in thinking through this, one part is that something that the commission is interested in is moving, the one extreme would be to, we have the Metro Enhancement Grant process in cooperation with Metro. Do we want to create a separate grant process? And then there's a whole litany of how, to what degree, right? All the way to the other end of, we keep it the way it is and we focus on our goals. And if projects come in that we think fulfill the commission's goals or priorities, during the budget process or outside of the budget process, like we entered into the agreement with the Willamette Falls Trust mid-biennium. It was a goal that we've had. It's a project we've been working on for years, and this trust opportunity came up, and we partnered with our other partners to fund that startup. So that was kind of outside of that process, but we had a line item already existing for Willamette Falls expenditures. The one part of me sees some benefit because it makes, you can point to something when someone asks and you can either say yes or no. I do worry that you open up a door that honestly, if you're good at it, you're going to be able to write and say, I meet whatever, either you're going to make them so general because you don't know what the universe of options are that may come to you, or you write them so narrow that it really limits it. And then, the other part of me is, you work through the budget committee, you are the city commission, you have the budgeting authority. Why limit yourself? And I don't know a more articulate or better way to say that. But it is your responsibility to decide what is fiscally responsible and what we should be investing in this community to fulfill the goals that you've been elected to accomplish. So I won't read this verbatim. I think my main point was you start to put boundaries around it, it really starts to feel like a grant program,
Right.
and you may start to limit your ability. And I do worry a little bit of, is this a new program of which, you're going to get 20 applications that you need to work through and try and figure out whether you want to fund them or not and make decisions why or why not.
Yeah, so I want to start on this one. I feel like I was a contributor to this coming before us tonight, so. And I really appreciated the staff report, so good job on the staff report. And the reason is because when we had presentations in the last year and a half, 2 years, that came before us of folks asking us, a nonprofit asking us for money, I wasn't able, I'll just say, I wasn't able mentally to get above that presentation and look at it from a policy and framework, the way you laid it out here. Like, if I could have gotten there at that time, I could have worked my way through a better discussion at that time. But at that time, when we had a presentation, my mind was focused on, do we give them money? Do we support their program or not? And it was just as simple as that. And then my question was, yeah, but there's so many nonprofits out there, that do great work. Why am I giving money to them and not to the other? And so I'll just speak and be very transparent. Like, for me, that's where my struggle was at. And I was not able to get out of that direct presentation to a higher level of a framework and policy making versus a grant program framework. And your staff report did a good job of laying that out and helping me to see that higher policy conversation, reminding us that, yeah, we can pick policy and we can say, no, these are the areas that we want to focus on, and therefore we're going to fund these. And because we have to manage this big budget and we're overseeing it, and we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul in our budget, we're already shuffling money around to try to meet our priorities. And so, anyway, I hope that helps, because that's where I was at. I loved the staff report just because it helped me get there. And because it helped me get there, it made it really easy for me to say, I don't want a grant program, and I think we should focus on our policies and our goals, and I think when we think about our goals and then have these discussions in the retreat, the conversation should then be, is there money tied to this, and where do we want that money? Like, when we're kind of targeting money through the budget process, which should help answer these questions of things that come up in the next biennium. Then we say, is this meeting or hitting, are these actions meeting some of the goals or policies that we decided we wanted to focus on? Yes or no? Yes, maybe we fund it. No, we've already decided from a policy perspective that we want to focus on these particular areas. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that the agreements, and we actually do enter into agreements with these nonprofits for some type of a service or a product. And I would
There's
argue that
accountability.
when you think about the Locks Commission,
Right.
directly tied to economic development and tourism. When you think about Willamette Falls, economic development, tourism, multiple policies and goals of the commission. The heritage area, larger branding of this area and a partnership there. DOCA, downtown. I mean, I don't see us in an agreement with kind of this tangential nonprofit that's not tied back in. And granted, they're very broad policies and arguments can be made about meeting them. But, those are the main ones that we have right now that are of significance. And I think that process was pretty deliberative in deciding to either partner to fund them or enter into those agreements.
Commissioner Smith.
I agree with all what has already been stated. I think part of it is just the process and how they come to us, and the worry that people are just gonna randomly come to city commission meetings asking for money. And there needs to be.
It happens.
Right, it does, and the more that that's known, or that people have success with that, it's like, oh, well, we can just do that. So whether it's, some sort of formal process that they fill out, some sort of thing, and we discuss it on an annual basis or semi-annual or quarterly or whatever that connects with our goals process, I think that makes a lot of sense. If there's a way to simplify that, I'm trying to keep it simple because I think there's parts of this that tie to a whole lot of other topics that we're not going to necessarily get into tonight, but because part of the tourism question and some of the grants take me to a whole nother place where we talk about street closures and barricades and those kind of things, which have always kind of set in the world of grants currently, but hasn't been resolved. I think there's some things we need to fix with all that. But in terms of these broader conversations and the big picture, I think that this is approaching it the way that you spoke about, Commissioner Smith, is Commission President Smith.
It's really long.
Commissioner O'Donnell? Oh,
Yeah, I think that's,
I think we should give Commissioner O'Donnell the last word.
yes, I'm done currently.
Commissioner
you not
O'Donnell, would you like to have the last word?
I know why you said that.
Because I'd
Is
like,
that a possibility even?
yes, I'd like to go
I
next.
wanna
and
see it.
I'd like you to have the last word.
that means you need to go next?
Yes, please.
Okay, Commissioner McGriff.
Thank you. With Commissioner O'Donnell's
Oh, please,
nod of
I want to
approval.
see if you can hold that line.
I was gonna say, where do we start?
We don't believe you can hold that line. I don't think any of us
I need to
believe
say
that.
something controversial so she chips back in.
Watch me.
Bite your tongue.
So
Okay.
I just want to concur. I felt very uncomfortable with the idea that people would just come in here and ask for money. I think it puts us in an untenable position where there's not a lot of transparency for the community. And I think that unless a project or a program is tied to something that we've already identified, as you stated, a goal or some other policy, then I don't think that we should be in that business. My work experience has been somehow it got around that our agency was funding arts organizations. Well, we entered into a DDA with the Oregon Ballet Theater to do a redevelopment of a building which was going to bring jobs into the community. So it was all tied to our goals and policies. All of a sudden, every arts organization in the city came to us asking us for, this amount of money and that. And we said, we are not an arts funding organization. As much as we love the arts, we're doing this project for these reasons. And I think we already currently have, with our current partners, we have a clear pathway to how we're doing this. And we have accountability on both sides. We're not just giving out money. Even with our former tourism development money we had, where it was OCCIT, there was accountability. There was a project that met certain requirements. We said, yes, we'd fund it. Here's your accountability. Here's your agreement. It wasn't just sort of a free-for-all. I don't think our community expects us to do that. And I don't think that we are being fiscally responsible if we would do that. So I think I kind of sense we're all in agreement that we're not going to create a policy about funding nonprofits because it really doesn't meet our mission and goals. And if it does, then we will deal with that in a different manner, which is through an MOU or a DDA or whatever the agreement is that we come up with that makes that legal and keeps it all together.
Commissioner Smith?
just to make sure you get the last word. So what we're saying then essentially is that we would direct any organization to the staff that's appropriate for whatever goal or whatever, if it's tourism related, it would go through, tourism economic development, and then staff would bring that to us, I assume, saying that this connects with our goals, or would that be something we bring up with our goals each year, or each 2 years, or annually, or something like that? Or could
I mean,
it just
in-
come through staff to us and?
In the
more of an
ideal
official-
world, it would be part of the budgeting process and the
Right.
goal
Right.
setting, right? I mean, ideally, but, we work on a 2-year budget, so I realize, like I said, one of our agreements is with the Willamette Falls Trust, and that happened out of cycle. But we were so invested in that partnership, it was already a goal. We already had funding for expenditures on that project. In having discussions with Metro and the county, it made sense to do that, right? And so that's where, some of this comes into your authority as the commission to make those fiscal decisions of, this is a good, when we made this budget, we didn't know this opportunity existed. We think this is a good opportunity to follow through. Because I'm leery to just say, we're gonna bring you something every month because someone
Right,
comes and knocks on the
right.
door.
Yeah, I guess,
You're the filter.
right, I guess that I think staff should be filtering that to some degree, or department heads. And if it's something that comes to the level that we think is, down the line that could fit with our goals process, that makes sense. But if it's something that really ties to something that is on our radar and that's part of our goals already, under the umbrella of some of our goals already, then maybe it should be brought to us then. And then we could decide, oh, that's something we want to talk about at the new year, or get a jump on it. I think that's fine.
I guess, just look at it from my standpoint, or with the staff, when I think about the trust or DOCA or the Locks Commission, those are very different partnerships.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah,
Then I'm asking for $7,000,
right.
right, to do this project. To me, those are very, very different agreements and asks. One, to me, really does fit in kind of a Metro enhancement grant type of program, or other grant programs that are available, rather than just us putting money in. Or, if they come in and it's like, look, we've got 7 partners and you want to be a partner, I mean, maybe that's a different conversation. I mean, that's the hard part, right? You just don't know what's going to come in out of the universe of possibilities.
So it seems like you feel comfortable, Mr. Conkle, with you and your staff kind of being a filter. If folks were to come to you and talk to you about a program, I guess the other side of that is, I'd say, our contact information is out there. If someone is, really serious about it or wants to give feedback, they can reach
Right.
out to any of us and see what we think. And, if it sounds like it meets, is in alignment with our goals and our policies of what we've said, then, we can discuss it.
Yeah, and I guess I just wouldn't be surprised that to be frank, I'm going to work off the budget that's adopted by this commission. And, it's going to, no pun intended,
You
sorry.
really want to be frank?
WWFD, what would Frank do?
So I
Lord
think,
only knows.
like I said, it's a pretty high bar for me to say, yes, let's go create this grant program or this MOU for something. I mean, there's going to have to be significant coordination or benefit, because like I said, everybody's going to be able to come in and say, I'm meeting one of your goals and it's a benefit for
Right.
the community, right? Yeah, so you may get it anyway,
Yeah,
because I may say
we'll
no.
probably end up getting
Yeah.
it anyway, so.
Yeah,
that's fine.
we'll listen.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, now, I agree, I don't want another grant program, I'll say that. And second, I agree with if someone comes forward and approaches the applicable department and it's in furtherance of the goals that are in existence at that time, and you want to bring it forward, that's fine. And if knowing that goals change, the situation changes, goals are accomplished, goals change, and I'm fine. And I think it's also important to understand that these financial arrangements, they don't exist in perpetuity. I mean, if a goal is accomplished,
Right.
the funding goes elsewhere, maybe to a new goal. And I just worry that once organizations start getting these monies, they just feel like, oh, that's an ongoing revenue stream. Not necessarily. And maybe you're on the verge of accomplishing a goal and the situation changes and there's a setback and they need additional financial support. So I'm fine with it. And any further comment, Commissioner McGriff? Is there anything I missed?
All right. She's being successful.
So I
think-
think what I'm hearing is, that, we'll try to focus on when we do our retreat, being very thoughtful and,
Yeah.
and maybe part of that is if folks have project ideas that, that's brought forward at a time, so we can try to discuss that when we're coming up with those goals and objectives and the budget that we're putting together.
Sounds good. Commissioner Smith?
And I don't know if this conversation happened during goals either, but one of the things, when we talk about, this high level kind of view versus smaller projects, whether they're tourism related or event related in the city, or parks related, I still want to have that conversation. We had a presentation quite a while back about fees, park fees, and how that pertains to local events. And that never came back to us, partly because we were waiting for a new parks director. But I know that one of the topics that I have been struggling with for many years connected with tourism is we don't have a real great system of how to deal with local events. And part of that's, has been funded through grants with tourism, and then in other ways it hasn't. But in terms of street closures and parks rentals and things like that, where I would love to see the city get to a point where we have a designated fund in the budget that is set for city-sanctioned events. And, people could apply for money for street closures or using parks, so that the burden that has been on the individual departments charging these fees for events could be actually done in a different way, in a simpler way. And there'd be some sort of a, structure of what we consider as a city-sanctioned event. And whether that's through what we end up doing with our tourism grants in the future, as we get other hotels and other accommodations in Oregon City, then maybe that is something we can tackle. I would love to see us get to a point where we talk about those kind of issues, so that our individual departments like Parks and Public Works don't think that they have to go out and deal with these individual things, that there's a fund for that to deal with street closures and park use and stuff like that for events. But that could be, I've been talking about that for 15 years, but someday I'd like to get to that. And that's a smaller focus kind of funds than what we're talking about big picture here, but I don't want to forget about it.
Commissioner Smith, I would totally concur with you on that particular item, because I think that the process has been just a teeny bit onerous for organizations, and I would like to see something like you're suggesting, because it shouldn't be a struggle to work with an organization who's doing an event on behalf of the city and for the benefit of the city in the bigger picture. It shouldn't, say, okay, you have to get concrete barricades. Well, I don't know anybody that owns their own, little forklift to move those things. So, so I love the idea. Thank you for bringing that up.
It's a huge topic, and I know it opens a huge can of worms, but that's why we haven't dealt with it, and we need to at some point get to some sort of dialogue about it.
Mr. Reed, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just wanted to comment a little bit about the conversation in regards to fees. One of the reasons why we're doing the cost recovery training is to address some of those concerns. And when we come to PRAC and the City Commission to discuss this cost recovery training, it will actually set up these categories for these events that we're doing that are sponsored or at no cost. And we will utilize PRAC and the City Commission to provide direction in regards to kind of where some of these programs actually land and how we should be processing these programs. So we are working on that, and our hope is that when we go through this process and with collaboration with PrAC and the City Commission, that we will have a concrete system in place to address some of those for parks.
Awesome.
Hey, Kendall, can you talk a little bit about when we think about cost recovery versus, individual benefit versus community benefit and kind of that spectrum and kind of how you're thinking about that?
Yeah, and what we're looking at is, right now what we're doing is we're gathering information specifically around what our costs are for some of the programs that we offer, and we're developing service categories. And so cost recovery model is based on if something is more of an individual benefit versus a community benefit. And based on where that program lands, that dictates the cost recovery percentage that we're going to recoup. But what we're going to do is, once we come up with these service categories, we're going to bring all that information to PrAC and to the City Commission and say, these are the service categories, these are all the services that we offer, and we're going to have a conversation and get input from the City Commission and PrAC on where you would like for these programs to land. And that will dictate how we move forward with processing those particular services. So there's a category for community events, special events, all of that's incorporated into this process.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I will wait, clearly until we see all of those details, but it sounds like you're going in the right direction. I'm glad to hear that work's at least started and underway. That's great.
Do you have a timeline of when you're planning to take this and work on this with PrAC?
Actually, the joint work session on December 8th, we're going to have our consultant actually present the cost recovery model and talk about what we've been doing. This is a 12-week program that we've been working on. And so after we present that information, then we will come back to PrAC and the City Commission with that information to get input. So in the next couple of months, we will have the joint work session, and then we'll come back with the service categories and get information from you on where these things should land.
Great. That sounds great. It only took 15 years, Commissioner Smith, but sounds like it's happening.
It's a good conversation. Yeah, it's good.
Commissioner McGriff.
So Mr. Reed, I like the direction that you're going in. There's just one little component missing. While I understand that PrAC represents a certain component of the community, I would like to have some input from just the general community in addition to PrAC. So to me, there's a third tier that we need to add here. So we need to get some community feedback. PrAC has their feedback, and then there's us. So I'm real interested in, even people in the Oregon City Parks Foundation, other groups that deal with, who are service users possibly, so we can, I just want to get a broader approach so that we're covering all of our bases, so to speak.
Okay.
All right. So to try to keep us on topic, I think it's a good discussion and a little primer for our next work session. So perfect timing in your question, Commissioner Smith. So I think we're gonna move on to a discussion item number 4, the construction excise tax for affordable housing. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I'm here this evening to get some policy direction from the commission to determine if staff should continue to investigate the possibility of adopting a construction excise tax, or a CET, we'll call it, through this meeting, for affordable housing. As you all know, the construction excise tax was a possibility through the 2016 Senate Bill 1533, which allowed jurisdictions to charge a construction excise tax. The construction excise tax itself is a fee on permits used to subsidize affordable housing in this case. The fee can be charged on residential or commercial, and in this case, commercial also means industrial, so commercial broad. It's a tax on additional square footages, so think new structures, additions, or if you're adding living space in an existing structure, then this tax would apply. The bill sets limits on how much we can charge for this tax in some cases. So for residential, it's 1% of the valuation, so the value of the structure. So 1% of the value of the structure can be charged as a tax. They would come in, we would charge the fee with the permit, take that 1%, and then the city would use that 1% to put towards affordable housing. And we'll go through how we can use the 1%. For commercial and industrial, there's actually no cap. So a lot of jurisdictions that have implemented it have kind of stuck to the 1% as a rule, but there's no cap there. So we're going to distinguish a little bit between the differences between residential and commercial or industrial, because the funding limitations are a little bit different, what you do with that money once you receive it. So for residential, you can take up to 4% off the top to cover administrative costs of this program. It will have impacts to staff to be able to create the program, implement the program, figure out what projects we need to fund, and then also monitor the ongoing funding of those programs.
With 4 or 40?
4.
4, okay.
So on the residential side of the house, half the money can go to developer incentives, and it can be any combination of what you see on the screen, which is fee waivers or reductions. You can subsidize system development charges. You can do finance-based incentives or exemptions from property taxes. 15% of that money goes to the state, the Oregon Housing and Community Services Program for things like homeownership programs. So that will go away to the state. Everything else we can kind of keep in-house and allocate as we see fit. The remaining 35% can go to programs and incentives such as purchasing land to convey to someone to build affordable housing programs, or grants. And the grants can include things like rehabilitation. So we generally get focused a little bit more on construction of new dwellings, but we can also modify and do some rehabs as well. So on the commercial side of the house, what we can do with that same dollar is different. So half has to go to programs related to affordable housing, and the other half we can do whatever we want with. So for example, City of Milwaukee takes the other half that's unrestricted and puts that towards citywide economic development. So you can do whatever you want with that other 50% of the commercial and industrial component. There's some exceptions to what gets charged a tax, and I think in this city that's important because the exemptions include things like schools, hospitals, government entities, things that make up a very large percentage, at least in the last few years, of development. So the things that would have the largest cost or largest valuation pay the most into the program. But those buildings if we think about development in Oregon City over the last few years, we've had multiple buildings at the college. We've had development at the hospital. A lot of our big construction projects have been ones which would be exempt. So just something to note when I show you numbers in a minute. You can impose some other exemptions if you want to. So it would be our program to charge. So we don't have to charge everyone if we don't want to, such as Portland, who exempts certain improvements valued less than 100,000 or for ADUs for a certain period of time, and Corvallis exempts improvements funded by affordable housing programs as opposed to just the affordable unit itself. I'm going to go through some examples so we know what 1% is and means to us. I'm not an economist, so I'm going to go through some examples of facts that we know, and then we can use our imagination from there. Okay, so this is just a typical detached home in Oregon City. We're allowed to charge 1% of the valuation for construction excise tax. In this case, the valuation is about $328,000, so we can get a construction excise tax of, you know, a little over $3,000. One thing that we need to be thoughtful of are what the city charges for residential, and this balance between wanting to provide more housing and also wanting to provide affordable housing and how that plays out. So we charge permit fees. In this case, we charged about $2,000 in permit fees, and that includes reviewing the plans and making sure that they meet all of the regulations so that the building is safe, doing inspections and that. And then also we charge system development charges, or SDCs, and those are, as you know, one-time fees for building a bigger sewer system because we need to accommodate use by this building. So one-time investments into infrastructure. And that on this is about 30,000, although I would say current SDCs are about 35,000, so they're a little bit higher. So you can see how adding construction excise tax into development will have an effect. So you're charging new development, and then you're taking that money and paying to subsidize other development. Here's another example. This is a 12-unit apartment complex. And so its valuation is about $1 million. So you get about $10,000 for construction excise tax. In this case, we get about $300,000 in system development charges. So you can see the overall cost to the city to mitigate the impact that development has and how that gets affected with construction excise tax.
Is that the one that's sitting there that looks like it's unoccupied?
I think it is near final.
Okay,
I have
so
to
it's
get
not
back
done
to
then,
you.
because every time I go by it, I think, I never see any lights, I don't see any, I mean, it just looks like nobody's there.
Yes, I think.
So it's not done then?
From my understanding, it is
Okay.
rounding the corner and almost
Okay.
to the finish line. So yeah, if it's on Holcomb, we're probably talking about the same one anyway.
Is this market rate?
It is. Or we've not been informed that it's not market rate, so I would presume that it is. And then last example is an office building. So it's a modest size medical office building. So its valuation is about $615,000. And so you could see how a building that small, the valuation is that high. So larger buildings are much higher generally, although there's a lot of variance there. So the construction excise tax does have a little bit of effect on their overall costs. All right, so I think the outstanding question is, how much construction excise tax would we get if we were to charge, say, 1%, which is the common thing across the board? The answer is that I don't really know, but let's guess together. Here's the valuation of all the permits issued in millions. So the more numbers along the bottom. 2020, it looks like, you know, we got higher than 2019. It was 110 million in 2019 for the valuation of those buildings. That's not our fees or how much we charge, just how much those structures value at. 2020 was 115. I would caution you that 2020 was through the end of June, so that's only the 6 months. We are very, very busy at the moment, so you could imagine that doubling in 2020. So you can see on the graph, we have a lot of money sometimes and not very much money sometimes, and that is one thing to be cautious of is just like your conversation earlier, we don't know how much money is going to come in when the markets are not good. Development's not happening, we're not gonna get money. We have heard stories from other places that were counting on money to come in. They approved development and then the development fell through before construction. So then, you know, hopefully they didn't spend that money before they got it. So, you know, it varies. And I don't have a good way to tell the difference between commercial or residential in our system for years past, but going forward, we do. I can tell you that we built about 263,000 square feet of commercial last year, and we're on track to do about the same this year. So a lot of square footage of commercial. All right, so here's some examples of other jurisdictions. Some were included in the packet and some weren't. I think the question is, how much did everybody collect and what has everyone been doing with this money? So on there, you can see sort of a summary. Corvallis is about $1 million. And they have been funding a position, and then they funded a $500,000 project, or they funded $500,000 into a project, though COVID hit, so then it got scaled down, so that 500,000 will get reeled back a little bit. Hood River, they used their money to borrow with it, and so then they were able to leverage that to buy a more expensive property that they couldn't afford before for affordable housing. And Portland has spent about 10.5 million, and so they started in 2016, so you can kind of see this variance between 1.3 million or, 1.8, and then sometimes up to 9 million in some years. Bend is making a lot of money because they have a lot of development, and in their view, this is critical for them because housing is so expensive. They feel that if they didn't have this program, that housing affordability would be even more unobtainable for a lot of people. So to them, it is necessary because housing is so expensive across the board. And they've spent more than 10 million. Oh yeah, and also I just wanted to, in Bend, you can see that it's been down to 250. So again, the variance in income that's come in. Other things we need to think about is need. So we've just been talking at the last meeting about the percentage of rent burden that we have. More than a quarter of a community pays half or more of their income on rent. Half is a lot to pay on rent. So we know that there is a need. The other thing is equity. Are there people in our community that we could help, and should we consider doing that? Also, we talked earlier about what some of those effects might be on existing permits that we charge as well. So there's kind of two sides to that. The use of the funding, we have a lot of ability to use and to do what we see fit, but that will cost a lot of, I would anticipate more than 4% of time to get a person to figure out what projects we should do and how to implement it, go back year after year to make sure that they're meeting these housing affordability targets and sort of coordinate all that. So I think it's questionable. We saw in Corvallis that a lot of theirs went to fund a position. So I want to acknowledge some unknowns that we have about what these needs would be. And then also, are there other tools in the toolbox that we can use aside from CET or supplement with CET, depending on what you decide to do? Should we be working more closely with housing developers or the county and try and figure out and really understand what the barriers are? I mean, we tackled a lot of our zoning code in the last couple of years. What's next? Is there other stuff that we can control, or ways that we can keep track of property for sale or coordinate people in some particular way? That's all I have. So it's more of a policy question. I can do a lot more research and get you a lot more facts, but do you want me to travel down this road or not?
Commissioner McGriff.
Thank you. This is a topic that I am really interested in for a variety of reasons, but I think one of the things that I have a great deal of concern about is that most of the new development that we've had that, other than single family, that might be considered possibly being affordable probably isn't. I guess I would ask the question, is any of the properties that are along South End, and I'm trying to think of where else they are that were done, I think by Icon, that are duplexes and things, none of those are affordable as far as I can tell. And I don't think that any of the projects that we've had in the last probably 5 years, I know we have Section 8 vouchers in the community, but other than the, Clackamas Heights and
Clayton Manor, all right, the
Clayton.
new one off Malala and Pleasant.
Okay.
The 24 unit for
Okay,
veteran.
okay.
That would
Yes,
be-
that, yes, excuse me, yeah, that's the new one, the newest one. But I think that we need to do everything that we can to try to move this along. I don't see right now the development community pushing this, or at least the standard development community pushing to do affordable unless there's some incentive for them to do so. And there are a number of organizations and developers who do specialize in that. And the one thing that we do have at the moment is we do have some land. It might not be 7 acres, but we have land that we could use as leverage and incentive. But I think having more information about how we could utilize this, I think would be great. I'd like to see us do something to help that. And I heard that a lot on our housing equity committee. We had 2 members who basically felt like they had to move out of Oregon City because it wasn't affordable for them. I don't know what their personal circumstances are, but based on your information, if a person is spending, 30 to 40% of their income on housing, there's a disconnect with none of that being available. And then we also have the issue of economic development and jobs. What kind of jobs are they having to work 2 or 3, with COVID, who knows who's working, who's not? How can we help fill that gap? We're not going to fill the gap entirely because that's not, I think, the entire role of local government, but we can, through our avenues, leverage resources that we do have, and this might be one of them. And if other people can bring other funding to the table, that'd be great. I know some historic buildings have received historic rehab tax credits. They've received housing funding from HUD. They've gotten a variety of funding sources, 2 or 3 or 4, to rehab a building. And I just read another story about another building in Portland that was originally designed as a hospital, now is going to be 124 units of affordable housing for seniors. And I thought, fantastic, that's great. It's taking a resource that's already there and expanding it and making it, livable and more affordable. So I think your option 1 is where I would like to see us go with that.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make my comments. I agree. I have been interested in this item for a while. I was at the LOC conference last year and saw the presentation by the city of Bend on their use of CET, and it was very impressive. And they will also acknowledge that it's a lot of work. They have staff devoted to it, and it's a commitment by the city. But there's a couple of items here that I think the CET allows us to do. It allows us to, we talk a lot about we're just riding the market. It's up to the developers to build whatever they can. This gives us a tool in our tool belt to partner with developers and to target development across the city with equitable disbursement of affordable housing around the city. And that was one thing that the city have been really focused on, that they didn't put all of their affordable housing in one spot. They concentrated on where transit was, where their workforce development was. They did equitable distribution of affordable housing across their, and that is one of their primary goals when they're working on their CET. And I loved that. They also specifically said that they use CET to leverage state and federal dollars. We currently have metro dollars that are going through the county. We don't have any home programs. The projects that are ready are going to city of Milwaukee. And there's gonna be money that's flowing down, and we have no way. We currently don't have a strategy or a way to take advantage of those other funds that we could leverage. And 2 more items. This touches on homelessness, and we get emails all the time about the homelessness in our community and what are we doing? And we point to our homeless liaison officer, but we know that policing and arresting these folks isn't the answer. And so I think homelessness is part of this conversation as well. And then finally, I'll just say, this is our chance to get in the conversation. We either get in and we want to be a part of the solution, or we're going to sit on the sidelines. And I think this is one of the tools that we could potentially use. I like that it's a low percentage, 1% doesn't give me a lot of heartburn. I will say that the city of Bend really stressed in their presentation that their advisory, they put together an advisory committee that included developers, included lending institutions. I wrote down several of them, I brought my notes, but, and they created a partnership, so the developers no longer were talking about the SDC fees, being such a burden, because they're essentially getting financial incentives to build and do projects where the city wants to have targeted development. So I still think this is a tool in our tool belt. I would love to hear more about it and just investigate it more. I think it'd be big. I mean, this is a big step, a big policy direction, a big goal we'd have to really give it some thought, but I don't have any problems doing more research on something that I think has a ton of potential.
No, Ms. Turway didn't want to necessarily throw numbers out there, but I'll throw some numbers out there.
Okay.
So let's just be conservative and say 50 million. So that's 100 $500,000 homes a year. Okay, or, that's discounting any commercial. So let's just use 50 million, right? So 1% is 500,000, 4% of that's $20,000. So when we talk about the commitment Ben made, it's not only the commitment to setting up the program. I can't hire a staff member for 20 grand, right? So it's making that commitment internally that this is going to be a priority, because to do that does take not just the financial resources coming in, but you also need the staff to do that work, create those partnerships.
Partnership with the county.
Whoever's going to write the grants, monitor the projects, right? So not that I don't think it's doable. I think it's a great discussion that you just realize, when people hear, oh, your city's getting 4%. Well, 4% is what is $20,000, right? On 50 million worth of value. So just some perspective as we walk through, it'd be great, if that's the direction the commission wants to go. Just realize we have to make decisions that we're going to put that energy and those resources in to be successful to do that. Because, when we throw percentages, it's easy to say, oh, just make it happen. But there are true numbers behind that.
I have so many mixed feelings about this. I mean, my social conscience says do it. My business acumen says I don't want to be, especially on the commercial end, I don't want to be an obstacle to development. So is 1% an obstacle to development? I don't know. What is an affordable home in terms of hundreds of thousands of dollars in this area? Can anybody say, is it a $300,000 home? Does anybody know what that number is? Because I don't.
Our median household income is about 65,000, so you would want to spend about 30% of your income on a house. So I guess yearly, 30% of 65,000.
That's the workforce employees.
Right. So
20 grand a year.
$1,500 mortgage.
Yep.
What does that get you for over 30 years? Not a lot. Well, I don't know.
We could probably do the math.
And see, then part of me that I wonder about is, there is this option to just start off and build affordable housing and avoid this construction excise tax altogether. But I doubt if anybody takes that option. I think given the high cost of land, they probably try to generate the maximum amount of revenue they can. I like what this commissioner said about taking advantage of funding and leveraging. I mean, we're missing that option at the moment. And I don't like missing out on that. And I've been listening to Biden talk about see others, take a look at others. And I think about that. That's a social conscience piece. I worry that if you put this on developers, builders, this is going to be a pass through, right? They're not going to reduce their income. They're going to pass along whatever. So we're basically doing a government program that reallocates wealth. And, that part I struggle with as a capitalist, that that bothers me. I guess the monies, and the way the monies are used, would we buy down SDCs? Would we buy down their taxes or just give them flat tax relief from property taxes? Can you tell me?
We don't have the
Yeah, you
ability to
would-
relieve anybody from property taxes, that's through the
Well,
county.
interestingly, if you read the presentation, it looked
Yeah.
like you possibly
We
could.
could, yeah, I mean, but we wouldn't be the sole arbitrator of that.
So I guess for tonight's discussion, I certainly don't mind investigating it because I know how difficult it is to get into that first house. But there's a part of me that balks at it, to be honest, because of the reallocation of, it's a government program that reallocates wealth, and I just wish there were better options to do it. I won't stand in the way of it. I'd be interested to see where it goes. I actually like the examples. I was just at Bend and a lot sold next to a friend's house. And my God, the lot sold for $400,000. The dirt, and it wasn't a lot of dirt, 75 by 100. It's like, how do people afford to
I'm
do
just
that?
concerned that the rate in which our houses are going up here,
It's insane.
I mean, it's crazy, in Oregon City. And so we're not that far from having the same issues of Portland. And in fact, some would say we're already there. We are lumped in with the Portland,
I know.
challenges, but
I had a son that had to move south almost to Salem to afford a house.
Part of the issue is even if you sell your house for some high price, where are you gonna go?
Well, there's nothing on the market.
Yeah, how can you get into something else? So
no, you'd have to move.
Yeah, and is that what we really want? I think that we, you and I both use the same word, leverage. We
Yeah, it's
have
the leverage.
resources that we can leverage in addition to this if we decide to implement it, and that's what we haven't been doing, and that's what we need to do. Part of the other thing that I'm concerned about, and I'll just say it now, it's not directly related to this, but, I am totally committed to us implementing a diversity, equity, inclusion policy for our city. And part of that policy will have to do with housing and equitable distribution of funding. And we just cannot continue on the way we are. And again, it's through no fault of our own because it's been a marketplace. But I think we as a city have the ability to influence part of that market by creating a niche by which we can leverage other resources. And that's what it's really about. It's leveraging these other resources. We have resources. We've been leveraging them a little bit, but we could leverage them more to make some of these things a reality. And I know there's going to be a cost up front, and I'm willing to take some heat on that cost up front. But I think in the long term, we're going to be better. And I saw the same presentation, and I love the idea that again, Laura, it's my housing inventory that I keep asking about, so we can look at strategically placing housing like this throughout the community. And that's the one reason why I don't like that little pod of R2 over there by Mountain View, because it's like a big cluster. It's like, let's diversify where we put these things so that people can be in a whole community, not just this type of housing and that type of housing and no other type of housing. So,
I don't mind exploring it, honestly.
So
And
no,
I
I'm glad you
I
are.
understand that at 4%, we're going to subsidize it. I get that. That's our social contribution. I'm just trying to look at it through other people's viewpoints and let go of the capitalistic view. And
Well, I totally get it. And I don't think the program would be successful or nearly as successful if we don't have a partnership with the development
Exactly.
community. I mean, City of Bend was very clear about that they weren't charting off on this territory without having
partners.
And so, and that's where I think, I would love to hear from the City of Bend and or some developers from the City of Bend as to how did the developers come to terms with this, effect on their market?
We have people right in the Portland metro area that we could resource, that we could talk to who've leveraged these types of opportunities. And I mean, and not just, not just in our surrounding, but I mean, that's kind of how PDC did it. There was some urban renewal money, there was some housing money, there was some federal money, there was this money. So it was different pots. And it has to do with the art of the deal, because some of those deals were a little crazy, but the amount of affordable housing that's being built in Portland is better off for the partnerships that they've been able to achieve and the leveraging they've been able to do. And again, like I said, we have something that some of the developers don't have. We have some land. So that's a leverage point. Getting the land is 99.9% of it. Trying to find a spot of dirt, and we have dirt. We got dirt.
Commissioner,
From what I saw in Bend, it's not slowing them down, neither Bend nor Redmond. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I know, it's frightening too, on the other hand.
Commissioner Smith?
I don't have any additional comments. I'd like to see this brought back too and focus in on it more.
Okay.
Is there a expectation of time? So when, to bring, is this something that we roll into the goal setting in January, February, that maybe?
I think so.
Like, you're not expecting something before, I mean, when I look at.
No.
6
Are
months
we
maybe.
missing any opportunity by not having it in place? Is there opportunities that are expiring? Does anyone know?
I don't know if it's expiring. I mean, it's just, you know,
Not
this has been
expiring.
around since 2016, 4 years at 1% over several hundred million of value that's been created, right? I mean, there's that. I don't think this is going away. Does this, it
No.
doesn't have a timeline for when it had to be implemented, correct? That
Correct.
I'm aware of? Yeah.
And there's metro money that is coming down the pike to Clackamas County. And if jurisdictions don't have projects,
And that's,
so that would
That's
be
a powerful
something,
argument,
but
yeah.
I do think that though, I think the goals retreat is where we decide how high of a priority
Goal-wise,
Right, I agree.
do we put this on
I
our,
agree.
goal? And,
Agreed.
and what's
Agreed.
realistic and what do we want to try to accomplish? So,
So
yeah,
maybe
no,
we do a little bit of background to build on this for the goals retreat.
Yes.
And if this becomes a priority / goal project out of that goals retreat, we can start going a little bit
I mean-
more in the direction, whatever that
Right.
discussion ends up as.
if you uncover an educational session between now and then with people that you talk to that you think would be a good presentation to bring to a work session, I would love to hear that too. I mean,
Yeah, I would
if it's
too.
just as a, hey, this is more information about this that can shed some light, some of the details or something, I
Agreed.
think that would be fine, but no time push.
Okay.
I guess my thought is, not only would it be a goal to discuss it at the goal session, but that maybe within 6 months of that if we decide that that's a priority to put something in, get something started. And that again, that's another conversation that I'm interested in having with Clackamas County, is I think that just because a jurisdiction is not ready, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to participate. And that's been my complaint all along. Just because we don't have any projects ready doesn't mean we're not interested in what's happening. And somehow or another, I keep thinking there needs to be some sort of equitable distribution of the money to say, okay, Milwaukee, you can get this much, and Gladstone, get this. So I'd like to see something set aside so that we have some goal to reach towards, to say, okay, if we do X, we can have this little pot of money.
I understand why that would be a good idea, although I also understand why Clackamas
I know.
County would say, we
I know
can't do
they-
that.
I know, I can ask, all they can do is say no. But, again, I'm trying to reach out to them and, to say, look, we want to be involved in that conversation, whether we have a project ready or not. I think it behooves all of us as a county and cities within the county to be looking at how we're cooperating on this, because again, this money, in my opinion, should be distributed throughout the county, to make it equitable, to look at it from a DEI lens as well. And maybe the money needs to go to, I don't know if they have any affordable housing in Happy Valley. I guess I'll have to ask. What's affordable in Lake Oswego? What's affordable in Gladstone? Is there?
I think they would be willing to do that, but there's a lot of cities who don't have projects, and we're one of them.
Right.
I mean, why would they set aside,
Well-
a couple $100,000 for a project when we've got nothing?
Well, we might have
you know?
one, who knows? We just gotta be at the table. That's what I want. I just want us to be at the table.
All right, I think you both have good policy direction on that one.
You good, Laura?
Yep, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to the city manager's report.
Thanks. And so, James, did you want to introduce this, or you just want me to turn it right over to Matthew?
I'll start off and I'll turn it over to Matthew. Good evening, commissioners, and good evening, city manager, ladies and gentlemen. Netflix is coming to Oregon City this weekend to film a movie called Metal Lords. And
Matthew Weinberg is there to brief you on what's going to happen with the roads and other things. So he's there and he'll be able to brief you.
Yeah, I want to make sure I can get to Restaurante Bistro Cubano, you know.
It's gonna be more towards the courthouse on most of it, but.
Good evening, Commissioners. Matthew Weintraub, Tourism Program Specialist here at City of Oregon City. I just want to, as James said, provide a quick update about some happenings here this weekend. So this is staff communication. In September, city staff was contacted by Netflix, the production side of their business, about potentially filming some movies in Oregon City or a couple scenes in Oregon City. Staff has been working with them through our existing film permit process. It's been a collaboration of not only the Economic Development Department, but also OCPD, Public Works as well. And we have been liaising with ODOT and TriMet as well for possible service and traffic interruptions.
Can you just briefly explain what that permit process is for our listening audience?
That's a great question. How much time do you have tonight?
You can do it. You can sum up. You can
He
sum
has
up.
2 minutes and he's got a minute and a half left, so he's gonna go quick.
So there's various levels of the permit, where depending on how much infrastructure the permittee or the applicant is looking to involve. If it's just a private house, it's very low level. But there is a form that we have filled out that is actually in our city code about what they need to be doing. That being said, this applicant has asked to do something that we've never had an applicant asked to do, which is shut down streets in our downtown for a number of hours, which is why we've had such large interdepartmental coordination on this. Happy to report that it's gone very well, even though we don't necessarily have a roadmap yet for how to do something of this scale when it comes to just a film permit. And so right now we have permission from ODOT, from TriMet. Our engineering department is ready to issue the permit. So we'll be doing that later this week. They're looking to shut down Main and Railroad and intersecting side streets of 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th for varying hours. They have deployed variable message boards. They have contracted with OCPD for traffic control. They have done several rounds of outreach to potentially impacted businesses, which is actually not part of our permit process. They've just gone above and beyond to do that. And as well, we'll, for businesses that are potentially impacted by some of the street closures, they will work with them for loss of revenue offset as well. So yeah, it will be happening from about 5 a.m. is when they'll start being on set, but about 6 a.m. Saturday morning until about 6 p.m. That night, and then again 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. On Sunday as well. And so just since it is such a new and a larger closure, we just wanted to give our commissioners a heads up, because I'm sure you'll be hearing about it from folks around town.
Will Kristen be putting out any type of Facebook post or any notices about the potential closures?
We have already started to do that today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Smith?
I just want to say that as someone that runs a business sort of downtown, depending on the time of year, I really am excited about this. And I know that it is Oregon City has had a lot of filming in the past. And I know that some of the businesses kind of struggle with, the balance of whether or not it's worthwhile for our city to kind of open itself up to that kind of focus. And so it is clearly we've created a focal point in Oregon City for film productions. And as that relates to tourism and economic development, I think we really should be a little bit more proactive in the future of how we help deal with the compensation piece to businesses. Within the city itself, clearly the production companies coming in are gonna hopefully it depends on the production company, and sometimes they haven't been so helpful in that situation. I don't want to see us put ourselves in a position where we're not allowing those opportunities to come to Oregon City, but I also want to make sure that, Oregon City is very clearly, it seems like almost every film production is always focused on the same block or same 2 blocks or 3 blocks in Oregon City. So it's not like, Portland where there's film companies coming in and all the time, and it may just affect this one block, and then 10 years later, it's another block, or 5 years later. In Oregon City, every summer, it tends to be the same couple places in the McLaughlin neighborhood or downtown. And so it's the same businesses getting hit more and more. And I want us to try to be, proactive in some way on how to deal with that in the future so that we don't push those opportunities away. Because I think in terms of tourism and economic development, having Oregon City visible on screen or on Netflix or anywhere else is a generation for bringing people. Clearly, as you pointed out the other night with the Oregon Film Trail and whatever meeting I was watching that was about, bringing people in. So I just, I know that some of the businesses are struggling with this balance, and I clearly think there's a way that we can hopefully address it so that we can, make ourselves more open to these companies, and I think that kind of also goes into that same bucket of tourism and street closures and park usage fees and all that kind of stuff. That was all under one umbrella, and so I think those things all intertwine.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yeah, well, I don't know if, I'm trying to think, Tony, do we still have any staff here that was here when the filming of Bandits took place? Because they did a whole
They
bunch of.
shut down the whole, yeah, they shut down everything.
There was a whole bunch of rehab on buildings downtown, plus they shut down part of Center Street, and I think our community had a really good experience. I also believe that the production company compensated the businesses, and maybe that can be something that's added to the permit that this is a normal thing. I agree with you, Commissioner Smith, that I think it's an excellent opportunity, and I would not have been so excited about it unless there had been compensation for the businesses. So, looking at it from a positive standpoint, they're going to be compensated for their revenues for that day. They can maybe take, part of the day off or do something in their building, but then, after 6 p.m., the regular nightlife's going to occur, and where are all those production people going to go? Hopefully they will be downtown and trying out some of our fine cuisine. Like, when Billy Bob Thornton was here, he was down at the wheel buying drinks for everybody. I mean, it was pretty incredible. And I don't know if there's any big stars in this. And what did you say the name of the?
It's called Metal Lords.
Say it again.
Metal Lords.
Oh, Metal Lords.
Yeah, it's a teen, I would say, dramedy, if you will.
Okay.
Battle of the Bands, kind of.
Battle of the Bands, ooh, that sounds, and so anyway, I think it's good, and I know that there are some business owners who are not happy, and I'm truly sorry for that, but I'm hoping that we can turn that negative into a positive with the fact that they're gonna get compensated. I think you said this is, I've even thought of the idea like 2 or 3 years ago, a bunch of us were sitting around saying, why don't we have an Oregon City Film Festival? I've got a whole list,
Yeah,
as
I
you
would
do
love
now,
that.
of films that were filmed in Oregon City. And we team up with Regal or whoever, and we show these over a period of like a weekend or different days, like the Oregon, they have that film festival that Regal does where you get a pass and you get to see these movies and they rotate in. I just think that would be an awesome sort of economic tourism strategy. I know that I was down at Regal 5 days in a row with my pass, seeing all these Oscar winner movies. We could do the same thing with filmed in Oregon City. I mean, we have a multitude of films that were here. And it's always fun when you're sitting there watching, saying, oh, I know where that is, I know where that is. And, and we watched Bandits from where I live because they blocked off Center Street, and we're watching my neighbor's house. And we all just thought that was, all the neighbors came. It was like a party. We had great time.
I know,
Miles Smith.
for the sake of brevity, I just want to thank you both for your comments there. Those support some of the discussions we've had internally as staff about how we could potentially create a more positive atmosphere for filming, but also for our business community going forward in the future, and do so in a clearer way. But then also, how do we celebrate Oregon City on film in a more public and dynamic way, so.
Mr. Graham?
I just wanted to say that we're using this Metal Lords filming as a test case, but to develop a standard operating procedure for movie filming in Oregon City, because we do need standard operating procedures for something like that. And so I think that this will go a long way. This is a very professional crew we're working with, and I think we can learn a lot about procedures that will make it standard. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Just use what we've, look at what we've done in the past and improve it.
And Matthew, I think part of their proposal was they have staff that are at the closure areas as well that'll walk customers to businesses when it's safe to do so. Even though a street may be closed, they will walk folks to those businesses when shooting's down or filming is down, and they can get them there.
Yeah, not only that, but we had several business owners that were concerned about parking and access. So we have made a slight adjustment. So they actually have staff members that will kind of be parking concierge for a certain, for I believe it's 9th Street or 8th Street that will allow extra parking downtown, even though it'll be closed to normal traffic.
And November is Shop Oregon City. So we want to include that as part of our message.
All right. So you've been given all kinds of great ideas. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Mr. Conkle?
That's all that I have tonight. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move on to the commission committee reports. We'll just go down the list pretty quickly. Commissioner O'Donnell, Beaver Creek Employment Area.
Nothing further to report on that at the moment.
Mayor Holliday's absent for Brownfield Grant Committee. Citizen Involvement Committee. I don't know that I have it. I'm the person. I don't have anything to report on that one.
Question for you on that.
Yes.
I saw some recent communication to where the staff person, Miss Robertson Gardner, was going to be reaching out to neighborhood associations to see if the city could assist them on setting up Zoom meetings to bring some of those inactive folks or meet, like, not inactive, but let's say, for instance, like Caulfield, which hasn't met for a while, to bring them so they can meet.
Yes, I will say, so at one of our meetings, I reported that the last work session, I reported from CIC that several of the neighborhoods had reported difficulty in running, virtual meetings. And I was super appreciative that our library staff, Greg Williams, gave a presentation to CIC on services that the library provides and extended an invitation to provide Zoom training and assistance with hosting meetings for the neighborhoods associations. It was kind of crickets at first, but then when I think it ended up circling back around and a couple of folks gave it some thought. And it's like, I think that may be a good idea. So hopefully, if they have the need, that they will follow up. So
Could you let us know if that's any of the neighborhoods are taking advantage of that? Because I'd really like to. I know, McLaughlin's been doing it all along. We've been meeting on Zoom, and the neighborhood's been meeting on Zoom, and I've participated in Park Place on Zoom. Those are the only two that I'm aware of that are doing that.
yeah, so whether or not they get assistance from the city, I would think Greg Williams or maybe Christina out of Laura's department would probably know more than I would. But yeah, we could always check in.
Ms. Turway and I were actually having an interesting conversation about the importance of neighborhood associations, and we were talking about if there's an appeal that comes out of a decision made by planning, that the ability to waive those fees, that if they're presented, not waive, that the neighborhood associations don't incur those fees. And then it was a curious discussion. I'm not sure what would happen if by no fault of their own, their neighborhood association is inactive. Does the individual then have to pay the fees or can they be waived? And that's a separate conversation, but it's related to this whole neighborhood association piece. I don't know the answer to that, by the way.
Well, I do know that if the neighborhood is inactive, that the land use presentation is supposed to go to the CIC. And the CIC represents that neighborhood as a body. So the CIC could, I would assume they could appeal and they could come and present to the commission. But I do know that the presentations go to the CIC in absence of an active neighborhood
Neighborhood, yeah.
association.
So is that the disposition? If the CIC steps in, then the fees are still waived?
I would like to look into that and give you the correct answer.
Yeah,
rather
I'm
than
not
guess.
sure
I don't
about
know
that
the
piece.
answer.
I'm not sure about the fees piece, but
But certainly they do stand in for the neighborhood notification, the neighborhood meeting piece, just to let people know that something's coming. And the purpose of that is just so that people can watch the website and then participate in that approval process. But I will get back to you on the fees.
Yeah, as you know from our discussion, that's a distinct possibility, so maybe we should be prepared with an answer.
I believe there's a statement at the bottom of the notice of land use action that states that if you are, representative of a neighborhood association, that you can request a fee waiver. It's at the.
I don't know that either.
Yeah, it's on,
That is-
well, no, I'm saying it's on the bottom of a land
what he's
use notice.
saying, if CIC is the representative party, it's not necessarily a neighborhood association, and would that apply? Ms. Turway can look it up and circle back.
Seemed it would be the same as, a neighborhood association.
Sure.
They're representing
On their
themselves.
behalf, yeah.
On
You
behalf
would
of.
think,
Yeah.
but, you never know. Our rules may not be that explicit. All right, Clackamas Heritage Partners?
Did you just skip C4?
Oh, apparently I did. You said you didn't have anything.
No updates at this point.
C4, I don't have anything on that one. DOCA?
DOCA has been meeting regularly. We had a meeting last month. We will have one, I believe, next Monday. And we are participating in Small Business Month for downtown businesses. There will be some sort of a promotion that all I can tell you at this point in time is it will involve cookie cutters. Some specific cookie cutters that relate to Oregon City. We're trying to see if we can get one that looks like the elevator. Since they're going to be made. It's not a general open, but there'll be a soft open, COVID distancing, ribbon cutting this Friday for the kiosk. There's been a very small group that's been invited to do that. DOCA has reconstituted its committees, and I am on the elevator committee along with two gentlemen who are in the district, Cyrus, whose last name I can't remember, and Dr. Jacob Gertz, who is an adjacent property owner and business owner. And then the other committees are also meeting on a regular basis as well. That is really about it.
With your permission, may I comment on DOCA?
Sure.
I had occasion to join a DOCA hosted meeting this morning on the Reimagine Oregon City Fund and the other grants, and I want to tell you, it was a great meeting, and I want to commend Mr. Graham for his leadership in that meeting and for DOCA and the way they handled the meeting and got input from many participants. I hope we kickstarted that program. It was dynamic, and I was very pleased that they've stepped into the fray and conducted that meeting. So good job by all involved.
It was also a joint project with the Chamber. Chamber and DOCA partnered together.
I understand, yeah, they were both there, and that's fair, thank you.
Okay. Metro Policy Advisory Committee, I don't have anything to report there. Willamette Falls Locks Commission, that's the mayor. He's not here to report, and I don't think they've been meeting. South Fork Water Board.
How's it been under that new manager?
Oh,
He's doing okay.
We'll give him an okay for now. Being a deputy CEO as he is, he's always a pleasure to work with.
We just talked about facilities, master plans and stuff like that, so no real updates.
We do, and we talk about preserving Oregon City's water rights, which is a key issue, going unnoticed by many, but not us.
Right. Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area.
Yes, two things. The committee was made aware that our executive director has unfortunately been admitted to the hospital with some medical issues, but the work carries on. We meet next Monday. One of the things that the board has implemented is at the beginning of each meeting, because we now have a policy regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, we're going to have what's called a DEI moment. Some statement is going to be made at the beginning of the meeting that has to do with whatever we're focusing on. So last month, We talked about Indigenous Peoples Month, and there was a statement and something read about that. And each of the members of the DEI committee will be taking responsibility for doing that each month. There is going to be a event on Thursday, and why is the name of escaping me? Anyway, I apologize. I know as soon as I hear it, I'll know what it is. But anyway, so it's an event that's going to involve a lot of heritage organizations. It's surrounding Shampooey and what's going on there. So it's kind of like, oh, it's a wolf meeting. That's it. Sorry. I knew it would come to me. It's a wolf meeting that is going to be held on Thursday. And I believe all the information about it is on the website. The one thing that I was asked at our last meeting is, they still do not have the check from the city, and Mr. Parno assured me that before he left that our contribution was going to be sent on, and apparently it has not happened. So why has that not happened yet? Because they're bugging me about that.
Sure, I'd like to address that if you don't mind, Commissioner President. Thank you for asking, actually, and thank you for mentioning. I'm sad and sorry to hear about the executive director. I have been trying to reach that individual
Shira.
regarding this, yes.
Shira would be this, she's our
Okay,
admin.
Shira is the admin,
Yeah.
so I'll have to reach out to Shira because
Yeah, Siobhan's in the hospital.
Okay, because I had sent several emails with a draft memorandum of understanding that I was hoping to get on the city commission agenda for November 18th. And I hadn't heard back because I wanted their review before I brought it to the city commission and make sure that they were on board with the MOU. And once we get the MOU brought to the city commission with approval and a signature on that, then we will go ahead and cut the check.
Okay, so I would recommend that be sent to Shira and to John Gustafson, who's the board chair.
Okay.
And this has all transpired over like the last 2 to 3 weeks. It was just, nobody saw this coming. And it's unfortunate. We are keeping her in our prayers.
Okay, Willamette Falls Legacy Project Liaisons.
Liaison singular is correct.
Excuse me, Commissioner O'Donnell.
We, as we saw from our last meeting, there's been a lot of conversation about the ongoing, and basically there's always the distinction between the public segment, the easement, which is in attempting to engage and involve all users of the falls, and the private segment as owned by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. So we're making progress. The meetings seem to be productive, and hopefully we have some concrete results to show. Thank you.
Did they have a recent meeting?
Last month.
Okay.
Yeah, we did. It was a lengthy one.
Thursday.
And I think it's online for your viewing, I believe.
I'm gonna plug into that. I thought the Locks group also had a recent meeting that was also recorded.
They did.
You're going and keeping us in the loop, so.
In this case, I was double booked, so a staff member went and gave me
can't
written
hear you.
notes. Oh, sorry. In this case, I had a staff member attend in my place, and I haven't read the written notes, but there was one recently in the
Okay.
last couple weeks.
Yeah, I have a couple meetings like that where I need to go back and listen to the meeting and so I can report out. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Oh, I do have one more thing to report. Sorry about
The
that.
last word?
No, this is not the last word. I forgot to report on I'm sitting on a subcommittee for diversity, equity, inclusion for the League of Oregon Cities, along with some mayors and other council people. And where we are is we have a draft policy and report that I'm hoping that after our meeting on Friday, I can share that draft with you all, even though it's going to go to the LOC. They have so many hierarchies of committees, but anyway, so we're a subcommittee, and then there's another committee above that, and then the executive board. So it basically talks about LOC, the gist of the policy is that LOC will be a resource for cities for diversity, equity, inclusion, relying on not only their resources, but resources from the National League of Cities. And at the conference that we just had a few weeks ago, there were several presentations. I participated in a panel discussion involving communications around diversity, equity, inclusion. I talked a little bit about where we're going, and all of the city commissioners city council commissioners, people that were on this panel, talked about efforts in their community and things that were going on in the community. And it was very positive. We see we had 45 people, if you can imagine 45 people in a Zoom meeting where we were trying to do breakout sessions. It was a little bit unwieldy, but it worked. We managed to make it work. But that's what they're talking about in terms of providing not only resources of where cities can go, they would provide a list of consultants to talk with. They are talking about providing some reading lists, talking about providing not only resources from their staff, but resources from league members themselves. So if another city wanted to talk to another person who's involved in this, they could have a resource to say, well, here's been my experience, this might not work for you, but here's kind of what we're doing and here's what we're experiencing in our community. So it's a variety of resources that would be available, going all the way through all of the league policies, all the way through not only their employment, but their hiring, their policies, procedures, everything. So they're committed to funding this and making this a reality.
Okay, so with that, this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.